All right, how's it going, everybody? I am back from Japan on what was a really exciting adventure. So, for anybody that's not familiar, wasn't following the community channel, this past week was the Final Fantasy TCG World Championships, and as the Oceania representative, I was invited to go and represent Oceania alongside four of the other best players from the region, and I did. And admittedly, I didn't have the tourney that I really wanted. I went 3-5. I'll get into kind of a full breakdown, but this is among the tournaments I practiced and prepared for the most. Period. I did a lot of prep work for this tourney, trying to really dive in. It's kind of hard to explain, like, because I'm new to Oceania, I really wanted to represent it as best as I could, and I have a lot of respect for other players in Oceania. Players like Paul and like Matiski, and uh, I really wanted to try to represent the region as best as I could, on top of just wanting to do well in general. So I wanted to kind of go through some of my process now that I am able to actually kind of talk freely. One of the weird, annoying things about testing for events like this is I don't mind as much if people know what I'm playing, but I don't want what I say to be a problem for the people that I'm playtesting with. And in doing that, I have to kind of be careful that what I'm saying isn't someone else's words. It's a really weird thing. I don't know how better to put it, but it's been a little bit of a struggle to do well, which is kind of why it's kind of nice the competitive season is over and I can just kind of talk about the game. So the first deck that I took was Refia, and effectively this was always going to be the case. I think that like there's an argument that like Mono Earth still is as good or better than Refia, but I still think that Refia just has such a clean matchup spread. Like there's just nothing this deck consistently loses to. I know that like a lot of other really good players are under the impression, like, oh, you can run it down with knights or it loses to chaos, and I'm gonna be honest, I just don't think that's the case when a deck has 25 EX burst and is able to run all of the busted summons. It's just able to win those matchups consistently enough that I don't think they're bad for the deck in the slightest. Like I'm on 25 bursts, and granted, Arc is kind of a fake burst, but like every other burst in the deck draws me a card, or does something useful, and I think that like that's just inherently really really strong, and it's something that continues to draw me to this deck over and over again. You really don't get janked out on this deck almost ever. Um, it has game in every single matchup, almost no matter what, even if it also has some problems. So if you've seen my content talking about the Oceania Continental Championship, I did a full deck profile there. There's only a couple of changes here for the most part. I swapped the Ingus for the Barts. This gave me a Wind Warrior of Light backup. And Ingus was kind of the most, changeable name anyway. Bart's has got a lot of other like side utility things that are kind of nice, but like generally his purpose is just to be a Warrior of Light backup that is not Earth, Water, or Fire. Um, Makes it a lot easier for you to cast Warrior of Light, especially because like Refia can now activate a wind backup. There's still some downsides, like if you have like Bart's and King Tycoon in play, which is not uncommon. Like it even happened in the tourney where like turn one Bart's, turn two King Tycoon, turn three Lena. It's a little bit more common to have issues with getting like Earth CP or something else, but like the only way to get the lockout state still is you have to get Bart's and King Tycoon and Lena and Sarah FFL, and then you can't cast Warrior of Light. But even in that situation, you've got three Warrior of Light backups. You probably got a fourth from a Kryl or a Lunith at some point, and you feel pretty okay. And then if you really need to cast Warrior of Light, you can always break the Sarah FFL and then play a different backup in that slot. That was the only main deck change. In the LB deck, I added one copy of Warrior of Light LB. Ended up being fantastic on the weekend. So this is not a deck that makes as strong a use of him as some of the other decks. In particular, I think Bart's Refia lists love this guy. But in this deck, it does fill a very specific and important niche, which is aggro matchups. Against aggro, you do not ever get to the four backups to play a Warrior of Light. So your goal in those matchups is play a single backup with Job Warrior of Light, which there's plenty of in the deck, and then you want to go Arc, Ferris, Refia, and now you have your spins, you have a removal engine in Ferris, and your opponent pretty much has lost the game when that happens. And Warrior of Light just puts one extra layer of protection, so your opponent can't just clod away your Ferris or your Refia and turn off the whole thing. It's very specific, it's a very small niche, but it is very important and actually came up multiple times. It almost won me my round 1 match, it did win me my round 2 match, and would have gone further. There's other neat stuff, like being able to protect an Une, for instance, because he doesn't specify that he protects non-Warrior of Lights. But in general, his goal is just in those aggro matchups to... you're going to go Lunafreya, and Warrior of Light as your 3 LBs that your LB casts. The other change was the Vajradhara Wu. This is in a slot that previously would have been something like a Cloud, right? And in general, Vajradhara Wu is just a Cloud that functions in engine for the deck. There's some neat stuff with playing a Ferris, dealing 1k damage to a big forward, and then playing Vajradhara to break that forward. But just as often, it's a way of killing a forward for a slightly higher cost than Cloud. There's some other small differences, because it's a fight effect, Vajradhara has to stay on the field to actually deal the damage. That could be a problem against a deck with a lot of instant speed interaction, but generally, this card being the right color makes a huge difference. But that's it for the actual build of the deck. What ended up getting swapped out, I think I went down a copy of Tidus and down a Leo to make room for them. All of which were pretty fine. I didn't miss the extra copies of either of them. I figure most situations if I want a second Leo, I would just double Lunafreya instead. Tidus can be a little awkward in this list, but it really is centered around LB2s for the most part, and Tidus is just the card you go for when you've already won the game and kind of lock it up that way, right? You're just looking to dig for more action. So I feel even Tidus being LB, an awkward LB number for the deck, isn't actually a problem for it. But there is one problem with this deck, and I've spoken about it a lot when I talked about the Oceania Continental Championships. I'm burning Cucullin and Leviathan, so I don't really want to play a water deck for my deck B. And I'm burning Kusith and Mistdragon, so I don't want to play an earth deck. I'm burning Amaterasu, so I don't want to play a fire deck. And you end up in the situation where you really need to be confident in what I would say are the weaker elements at the moment, in wind, ice, and lightning. At least for their generics. I ended up taking this as my second deck. Kind of over the course of last set, Mono Wind had a bit of a resurgence for some really, really specific reasons. I talked about it a little bit in the tier list video that I made, but a combination of Fina being really good at dealing with LBs, your opponent goes for a Tidus and you Fina it, you come out so far ahead, which also then protects the backups so that Mono Wind feels more confident with its backups. More decks, Mono Earth has a pretty bad Zidane problem. And a lot of other metagame trends, like Alexander being really good. And basically, this deck has one problematic matchup, and it's the Chaos Combo deck. It should never beat that unless the Chaos Combo deck absolutely bricks. But that's fine. There is no deck other than Refia, in my mind, that has no losing matchups. I think that like the closest other one is Mono Earth, but Mono Earth is not meant to be favored into this Mono Wind deck. So you have kind of an interesting dynamic there. So I went into the tourney. I'll show all the other decks that I was considering for a while, but when this list won in Japan, I kind of looked at it and said, hmm. And I started really trying to evaluate both what was in the deck now that was making it succeed, and what could I do to improve it. Historically, I've not been a very good mono wind pilot, and I would say that, in fact, I think this was probably the wrong decision for me at the event. But I've always enjoyed playing wind decks and storm decks in particular. And granted, I do a lot better when I'm playing Earthwind. It's just, it is what it is for me. But I don't have access to that. I think that the reasons to play Earthwind are these two cards and these two cards. And without those, I should be playing either Mono Wind or Icewind. And I think that Icewind not having access to Fina means that it's probably just not worth playing in the current meta. So I took Eureka's list as a base and started reevaluating as much of it as I could. And I really liked the place that I think this deck came out to. I think that overall there are a lot of other issues that ended up being the reason I didn't get into Top Cut, but I think that this build of Wind is more than good enough to go the distance. So let's kind of do the card by card and the breakdown of what I did. We'll start with the backups. So Chocobo Sam, Fat Chocobo, and Chocolate is like the engine in Mono Wind. Any hand that has Chocobo Sam is worth keeping. And honestly, any hand that has a backup plus Fat Chocobo is probably worth keeping as well. You have a secondary engine in Crystal Chronicles, which is 2 copies of Nordstalin, 1 copy of Stiltskin, and I only went with 1 copy of Nash. This ends up being a really impactful card in the right matchup. Things like popping Tyros or Sarah FFLs make it... It just ends up being this very annoying effect that like doesn't feel like you should have access to for this cheap on a card that develops a backup. And I've played games against Warriors of Light where I break 4 backups and they've played 9 and they end with, not enough to do anything. Just a really powerful card for a pretty innocuous little comment from Opus 20. 2 copies of Carpenter. These backups, I think, are some of the most interesting and most impactful of all time, which is really cool. But I love them. I love the speed at which they come out. You need some standard units because Luso is so strong in the LB deck, and these are just the best standard unit backups in a mono deck, in particular Mono Wind. Something that was a really fun revelation that I didn't really pick up for a long time was just how strong it was to hold this. There are times where if you need to go for a turn 3 Luso, the extra 1 CP off the Carpenter matters a lot less than having an extra cast on the next turn. So like you Chocobo Sam, Fat Chocobo Chocolate, and then hold the Carpenter in hand can actually be better than the alternative, which is a really fun thing to learn. Kind of the new thing to the deck is there is still a Moogle engine, but it's massively reduced. I'm not on like the Moogle 11 stuff at all. I think it's really powerful, but also kind of clunky. You end up running like a lot of named backups, and while it does, pretty much ensure that you have access to things, I started viewing this deck as more of a deep draw deck. And so instead, we kept the Moogle engine just because Chocomog is a great little summon. 1 copy of Mog BE gives you access to either Citra if you need to combo off, or a copy of Fina if you need a defensive line. Always really strong. And kind of the spicier tech was this 1 copy of No-No. And I'm pretty convinced this is just the best backup in the entire deck. So things that No-No enables, he is a backup that comes into play untapped. So let's say I go to, I have Chocobo Sam, Fat Chocobo, Chocolate. I can go Chocomog for No-No on the next turn off of one of those backups, cast the No-No, activate all of them, and all of a sudden I have 4 active backups. and I've only spent, the Chocomog plus 2 CP to play the no-no, right? Like, Chocomog plus 1 card in hand to play no-no, and I'm 2 casts in all of a sudden. Now I can cast like my Citra, get my Alexander, get my draw 2, and I'm just off to the races on getting my way to that Luso. But also the pairing of no-no with Adele is really strong. It makes Adele's downside just not exist anymore. It's just a good card, as it turns out. Not enough to play more than one, unfortunately, but easily was my favorite card in the entire deck. Lastly, was Venat. So I played against a friend of mine on Mono Earth a lot. And I started really having issues with Mist Dragon and Amaterasu in particular. Venat just ends up being a really nice protection spell for cards like your Rosa. Things like making sure your Azura can get back, your Zidane or your Luso when you're going for it. She's just a really strong card. I'm trying to remember what all this has been. It was a class 8 at one point, I want to say. But I didn't really want to run that in the deck at all. Like, it helped with some LBs. In particular, like Ico, but like, you kind of just have Ace most of the time when you have LBs, so it's probably fine. For the monsters, 1 copy of Evere, 2 copies of Atomos. Pretty standard there. Forwards. So I was on 3 Luso, and I did not play Belgamine. And this was intentional. I playtested a lot with Belgamine, and I just kind of found that she didn't really help the deck. Something I was really worried about with her was, or like I was really excited for, was maybe like against aggression or chaos, you could go like turn 2 Belgamine and then like cast like Alexander, Chocomog, and then you have the spin, right? And in practice, I like ran Belgamine at 2, under the assumption that I needed to run her at higher numbers just to make sure that I was doing so. I was on like 2 Belgamine, 2 Luso. And every single time Belgamine let me down. Just was not a good enough card. Turns out that I might have been wrong there. Looking at the players that actually ended up top cutting, Belgamine was in all of the windless. But to me, I didn't see her changing what the deck really did, and I didn't think she raised the ceiling on the deck either. Cutting off floating effects is nice, but isn't necessarily the difference between winning and losing with a card. Probably would be a card I would go back and experiment with more now, but one of my goals with this was to get to the place where I felt like I was comfortable before going there. And again, this is not a deck that I was super confident in my ability to play well. 1 copy of Izana, just a really cheap card. It's funny how much better this little idiot has gotten over time. But searching any of the Chocobo summons, or Fat Chocobo, or Chocolate, just is pretty good. 3 copies of Zidane. At one point, one of these was a Nini as an additional Stiltskin and Mog BE target. But, and like, it was really good actually. Like, it playtested well, really helped in goldfishing. What ended up being the deciding factor on why to cut it, though, was that while she was really helpful for goldfishing, and one of Zidane's problems is that like it is a really bad card to goldfish with, I expected to see a lot of mirror matches and mono earth games, and all of those come down to how many cards can you get Zidane to steal. It's just kind of introducing variance into those matchups in a way that really the card designers can't intend. Stealing things like Mist Dragons and Amaterasus and Warriors of Light just kind of wins the game for you, and for that reason you need the 3 copies of Zidane to guarantee that you do it. Didn't matter, but I mean, I literally lost one of my rounds to a Zidane, and there's just nothing else that would have done what that card did. So I had the same assumption that I could do the same to other people. Didn't ever actually matter. 2 copies of Rosa. 3 has been standard, but I ended up diversifying it a little bit by running 1 copy of Adele instead. So the logic here is pretty simple. Adele and Rosa are effectively the same cards. Rosa has the very slight upside of being the untargetable thing and being able to play the cards from the top of the deck. But Adele's haste is actually really nice, actually, as it turns out. Being able to threaten 2 damage out of nowhere in a deck that can really struggle to push damage, with like the only other haster in the deck obviously is Zidane. I really liked the 1 copy of Adele, and the only slot that I could think to cut was Rosa. The 3 copies of Fina, again, this has kind of gone back to 3 to help combat the prevalence of Tidus in the meta. You just have to be able to protect yourself in those control mirrors. It's a very strange card in that, like, there's things that it does really well for the deck and things it does really poorly, but in general, like, you need to be hard drawing this card right now to survive in control mirrors and any deck that isn't trying to kill you super, super early. The 3 copies of Lulu, and then 2 copies of Citra, a card that I did not realize was going to be as strong or as potent as she is. And Mono Wind is just the perfect place for this card. She's a 3 CP card that represents 2 casts. So if you can do like cast Citra then can pull Alexander. The power reduction is really important because when you combine Citra with Luso, now anything is probably going to die to Luso's Cleave, because power generally caps out at about 10,000. If there's a downside to this card, it's that like you do have to remove the cards from the break zone, but even that is kind of fun because she doesn't specify that you have to remove all 5 cards. So if you could remove, say, 4, like targeting, say, a Zidane, and then you Azura back the Zidane on the stack of choosing the 5 cards, you can still get the summon off without losing the 5th card. Just a little fun tidbit that this card actually has come up with this card plenty of times in testing. She's also just kind of annoying, as it turns out that she doesn't have a second auto. It's 1 auto that removes the 5 cards and then immediately casts the summon. There's no gap there, so you can't wait for them to remove the 5 and then Amaterasu it. You still get to keep your 5 cards in the break zone, which is really strong. Summons. The deck has gotten a lot more streamlined. It's pretty simple now. 3 Azura, 3 Alexander, 3 Chocobo. All of the best wind summons in the game. 1 copy of Chocomog, just a great burst. When paired with Nono in the deck, it makes for a really, really nice backup engine as well. 1 copy of the Chocobo EX summon. This could be a really nice way to kind of end a big cast line while trying to get that last copy of Luso to hand. 2 copies of Dryad, just some nice spot removal on a cheap cast. And the big one, 2 copies of 4 CP Alexander. Between all of the priming and everything going on, and cards like Une that could be problematic for the deck, you just, having this card in multiple copies ends up being really, really strong right now. In the LB deck, 2 copies of Ace, obviously. The 1 Luso to make sure we have access to Carpenter. The name on Luso really sucks. There have been times where I play Luso, my opponent just lets him sit there to lock me out of doing the removal with Luso, but when you need backups in this deck, you really need backups. Same for the 1 court-mandated copy of Sid Highwind. This deck does not have a ton of backups, but when you need them, you need them. 2 copies of Zidane LB. This is a card that really has come out of nowhere to surprise me. This card's amazing. You kind of, even though this deck is a deep draw deck, it's intending to. I have drawn 8-9 cards in a turn before with Alexander's looping them and such. Between both Zidanes, you actually can deck out opponents, especially if they're also drawing a lot of cards. Mono water or mono wind. I've had games where I won by going Zidane, Dryad Zidane, Chocobo, Zidane, when I had 3 in the LB deck at one point. I ended up taking 1 out just to run a copy of Surges. I figured there's a non-zero chance that Mono Ice was going to be a popular deck. If I could steal any 2 CP Ice backup, I could then play Surges. Seemed like it was the most likely of them to matter. But most of the time this guy was going to get flipped over pretty early. And 1 copy of Little Leela. Card's not great, but Sid Randell can be a problem for Mono Wind if it can't draw Dryad, so I figured that there could be a situation where I go 5 backups. My opponent Sid Randell, so now Luso is offline, and I just go, okay, cast Leela and pass. And if they don't deal with it, or say they dull freeze it, you could, Azura it to activate it or something. Just, like, fine. I don't know that I ever cast her. There were a couple times I considered it. I also find that, like, timing aces can be a little annoying. If you have, like, the 2 monsters out, he's a pretty easy 8k cleave, but you're still kind of taking a turn off to do it. And there are also times where it's like, you just got board wiped, you have 5 backups, and you need to do 8k, so you have to, like, do a mini storm turn before acing, which, like, is a little bit strange to do. Card's obviously really, really strong, but just timing him can be a little awkward. And yeah, so that's the win deck. I had practiced this deck nonstop. So my wife would be at Digimon Locals, and I would be the weird guy in the corner that just goldfished this deck over and over and over and over again. I have probably run, almost 200, 300 hands of draw my 5 cards, draw my 6 card for turn, and try to Luso on turn 3. And I had about a 75-80% rate of getting that Luso off on turn 3, which I think seems pretty solid. I will say that, like, the amount of goldfishing I do sometimes might be a downside with this deck, just because I have a really bad habit of missing cast triggers on stuff like Lulu and Citra, and, like, the end of turn trigger on Nono. Things that I think I'd be a lot better with if I wasn't goldfishing and was actually playing against a human opponent. And this is, like, a really weird deck because I really don't like playing mono wind at locals. Just like feel kind of icky doing that. It's not very fun to play against, and I know that, like, it tends to monopolize the time the game is played. But obviously I was playing it at locals and trying to get this as ready as I possibly could. All in all, I really don't feel like my decks were the reason that I didn't reach the top cut. I'll go into matchups in just a little bit, but, like, I really do think that I have the best Refia build for consistency and matchup spread, and I have a very strong, like, at the bare minimum, a very serviceable mono win deck. And I think that every single card in here, I can justify why it's in here at the ratios it's at. And I really like the deck. I think that, like, it came together really, really, really well. But let's go into Fantasyland a little bit. Let's kind of show off. So first of all, I think, yes, right here and up are all decks that I have ended up building in Materia Hunter since the new set dropped. I just sometimes go in here and build decks, and, like, it's fun for me. I enjoy doing it. So some of the decks that I considered, I was really interested in a Siren deck. In particular, I was really happy with this one. This is a Folka deck. So Folka with the new Leviathan. 22 summons, 9 forwards, and the goal here is the new Leviathan is a really, really strong card, as it turns out, and can kind of just lock your opponent from playing the game, especially when you pair it with an Une. And I base this on, like, the Chaos Arc decks and also kind of the mill decks. But I'm on, I got the 20 bursts in here, thanks to, Tyro, the Thornton, Hilda, all the Leviathans. I'm even on the Opus 1 EX Burst Leviathan. Really like this card in the deck, actually, because it's a protection spell as well. You can use it with your Yuna to return your forward to hand. I love this Linnae backup right now as well. Sometimes you end up in, like, Mist Dragon Wars, and the fact that she activates means that you can cast your Mist Dragon on curve even when you're tapped out, which I think really makes a huge difference sometimes when you're trying to stop your opponent from playing the game. And I was really happy with this deck. I think it came together really nicely. It was really fun to play. The biggest downside really was, again, Kusith, Mist Dragon, Tyro. We're all, and I mean like Une, but like I could find replacements for Une, but like these cards are not replaceable, in my opinion. So, um, this one ended up getting kind of left aside for that reason. But I really like this deck. I think it's really, really strong. Give this a shot at locals sometime if you're interested. Also, like I do stream locals on Wednesday nights in Australia, which I guess is like really early morning on Wednesday in North America. But if you want to hop in and if you have deck requests for locals, I can very happily play them. I considered playing Chaos Combo myself. I'm just not a fan of the deck or the play pattern for it. Um, I feel like I put so much value in player agency and decisions, and this deck doesn't give me the agency or decisions that I want to. So I ended up not taking it for that reason. I think the deck is fine. It's powerful enough. I really don't like playing against it, which maybe is a reason to play the deck, is if I think it's strong enough that I don't want to ever play against it. But um, pretty much, like, it's a pretty standard list, I think, that I had here. I think some of the weirder stuff was like the one copy of Chime. As it turns out, you can use it to dig for. It can get the one cost chaos backup to get a special for you. It's a very cheap forward, which is actually really important because it means that you can kind of push damage without committing it much to the field. And, getting like lightning or Theramobiuses or anything like that for colors can really matter. Behemoth was in here. These could probably be like one Behemoth, one Melusine, one Spectral Keeper or something, but like the actual slot here doesn't matter. What does matter is the 2-cost lightning monster that in theory could like push a point of damage. It's kind of like a blue worm that doesn't draw a card in entry effectively. And yeah, I mean, like I said, it seems strong. I just don't like playing the deck. I feel that like I'm giving my opponent the agency to beat me when I play it, and I don't trust that. That feels really really bad. It was interesting hearing some of the players. I think it was JFB that said like playing this deck isn't fun, but like building it is like solving a puzzle, and he really enjoyed that. I can sort of see that, but also like I settled on this list with like a couple of small variations within about um, like the first day I was on Materia Hunter after the full set was revealed. And I changed a card here or there. Like I said, I put the Chime in. Alize ratios moved. Like the deck doesn't feel that difficult to solve from this position. Like maybe you can get extra Odin in to increase your lightnings, but like I don't even think that's necessary because now you have a use for extra lightnings that aren't there with the Odins. And I think the Earth Lightning is like one of the most broken cards in this deck in particular. So like I don't know, like this deck just seems correct to me, and like I said, the only thing that like maybe would change is like the behemoths for like different lightning 2-cost monsters. But like even the behemoths I think are fine. Like they're defensible in those slots. Or some other stuff that I considered. We're deep enough in Zondi. Actually, I thought was a card that had a lot of reason to exist this set. So I played a lot of Mono Lightning last set trying to make that deck work, and one of the things that I ended up coming to a conclusion of was that it was strong, but not explosive. The ceiling on it was very low, which meant that any deck that was able to go very big would beat me. Things like Mono Earth were really bad matchups because Mono Earth would just hold its card in hand, do the whole thing in one turn, and beat you. So what ended up being a counter to that was actually Boonavels. I don't really think Boonavels is great played fair, but when you can cheat him into play, I think it's the best card you can cheat into play off of Zondi. You can revive Boonavels, sacrifice Boonavels and the Zondi and the other forward, make your opponent sacrifice 3 forwards and discard cards from their hand. Seemed really, really strong. And like I had a lot of fun with this deck and kind of piecing it together. There's a lot of cards in here that I haven't played anywhere else. Cards like Glauca to try to have mini Storm off turns. I love the Lumina in here to get the Boonavels searched and then into the break zone. The 7-cost Lightning is an alternate revival target that you can play. Just if you want to like draw 2 as opposed to reviving the Boonavels, your opponent isn't like committing enough. I love the new Y'shtola in here, so we have tons of specials for the Y'shtola. It just seems like a way of really raising the ceiling on this mono Lightning Silence deck that I really enjoy playing. Seemed nice. There are a lot of cool things here. Ended up not taking it because I thought the mono win deck was slightly better in most situations. What else? I messed a lot with trying to make Barnabas Odin OTK work. I ended up with this really interesting water fire samurai shell. So the idea was that like you could go turn 1 Larsa, turn 2 Realm, turn 3 Barnabas, Prime Odin, attack, 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 end the game. And the Realm could fetch a Haste Goblin for herself to win on the spot. I would like to do the extra damage. I think you could do it even go. It's like, yeah, actually, it's just turn 1 Larsa, turn 2 Realm, haste the Realm with the Goblin, cast Barnabas, Prime Barnabas, attack, 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 and the game is over. This list is really, really cool. Again, being able to get like Behemoth in for Hien is really fun. I really like the new Tenzin LB. I think it's a really strong, unique card. And there's some fun stuff like Jed being a water samurai being relevant. I think Ayame is a card with the new Tenzin. It's actually really strong. So on and so forth. But ended up being kind of just a weaker version of Hitflow. Like it lost all the stuff Hitflow lost to and didn't break any new ground. I tried a version of it without the samurais for a little bit. Oh, no, not that. Where is... It's like the dumb without the Sams. Yeah, there we go. This is just like... The idea of this was using the Scions as a control package, and then just Barnabas, Odin, kill them once you like wipe the field with like Y'shtola over and over again. 15 bursts. You see all the summons over here. Again, just lost to all the same stuff that every other kind of weird OTK deck did. There might be something to this deck, to be quite honest. Again, I'm just playing a lot of really strong cards. Like a Water Lightning build that's playing Realm could, in theory, just run a copy of Behemoth in there and run the Barnabas Odin, who is, like, fine on its own. But it wasn't impressing me, and I really wanted to be impressed with the deck to actually take it. Similarly, I messed with Behemoth in Turks, Ice Lightning Turks. Just because Cisne is actually like one of the best Behemoth users in the game. This is actually a combo to keep an eye on next set, I think, as well. All in all, wasn't super impressed with Behemoth, but I do think there's a lot of potential for Cisne with Behemoth in particular, and using that as a way to quickly end games, especially when we get better like Elenas and stuff. I tried making a build of Refia work without playing Earth. Using like the Bart's Hero. Like Ingus is in the deck, but like I'm not on a 4-color Warrior of Light. This would allow me to play Mono Earth as my deck B, potentially, using just the Earth cards. It's fine, but again, I'm losing a lot of the big strengths that I really enjoy in Refia. And I'll get to other matchups, but there's somebody playing a very similar deck to this that I thought was really, really cool. Right, so let's get to the actually, like, the other big things. So I did a lot of testing with Warriors of the Crystal and with Mono Ice. These are the decks I was the closest to taking. I think that, like, I was shocked to see so little Lucio at Worlds. In a lot of different shells, like I said, I think he plays well in Mono Water. I've seen him played with a Wind shell, Earth Water, is really strong, but just the combination of this guy with Glaciella, and you end up in the situation where you have so many crystals that different cards do different things. This is like an older build, but like instead of playing this Lena, you could play the Crystal Lena, which is effectively a legend if you just have unlimited crystals, right? And that was something that I didn't really register just how strong. Like when you stop worrying about like how are you generating crystals and you just have them, which Lucio enables. So many cards just become insane. Like Ceramobius becomes this really obnoxious draw and scry engine on a body that can be hard to remove. X and Mill is a card that some decks just do not have a way to deal with, and you win the game sometimes when they can't deal with it. I think ratios on these decks have been really difficult, like because you have to run some number of the Warrior of the Crystal, and the only one that's actually good is Velis. And to be fair, Velis is also makes the other ones like more playable. But yeah, so I've got like a bunch of different shells for that. And the other thing was a lot of mono ice kind of control. Things like priming, for instance, I think ended up being like the direction that I eventually went with this. I think that probably if I was going to have done well at Worlds, it would have been on a deck like this. But I was pretty convinced that I thought Mono Wind was the best deck I could be playing, even if I didn't think I was necessarily going to be the best pilot of the deck. I thought I could do well enough that I didn't need to play these decks, and I felt these were relatively unproven overall. I will be experimenting with these a lot. I think that there's so much potential. I think they're just fun. I think Clive, in particular, is just a really fun card to play with. So I'm happy to finally have my place out of the card, so I can play them in paper and not just in online testing. That $25 price tag is very well deserved, though. And yeah, it was a really exciting tournament for me. So again, I went 3-5. Let's kind of go over the matchups. So round one, I was against Brian Berkeley, who was playing Chaos Combo. I won the die roll, went first. I played like a backup. He goes Chaos, Flare. I don't hit a burst until like damage 2, which was a Lena, and then like damage 5 was Lev 6, but the Lev 6 was at a point where it couldn't prevent damage anymore. I get to 6 damage, I have Stabilize, I know where 2 of the Chaoses are, and it turned out that the third Chaos was in the top 7 cards of the deck remaining, and if it was any lower in the deck, there was a pretty good chance I would have just won the game by putting him in a point where he could never cast Chaos anymore. Really unfortunate. Only so much you can do about that. It sucks, but that's kind of what that deck does, and when it wants to win, it does win. There's maybe an argument I could have pushed damage more than I did, but again, I was in a situation where pushing damage could lose me the game if I hit like an Odin or a I could in theory push him to the Chaos. So like I was playing it as safe as I could, and the only out was a Flare, and he drew it. So then I go to my round 2 and play against Paul, who's a fellow Oceania player. He's also on Chaos. At which point, I'm feeling okay about the fact that I put Refia on deck A. It was a big debate of, do I put Refia on deck A or do I put Mono Wind on deck A? And I would have been in a bad spot if I put Mono Wind on A. So this time, my damage 1 is 11-6. We get into a really gummy board state where I've Shantoto'd, so 11 cost Chaos is free, but I keep using it to, like, he plays 11 cost Chaos, and I donate Ferris, and then I spin my Ferris back to the top of my deck so I can play it every turn, and then I spun his Chaos back to the top of his deck, because I was worried about the same thing happening. So I was looping my Ferris and making him draw Chaos over and over again, trying to curate his hand to make sure he didn't get to flare me and end the game that way. But I mean, I eventually used the time that I got with that to put myself in a position where I couldn't possibly lose the game. So I was 1-1. Round three, I sit down against a Japanese player. I forget his name, or I forget people's names. I'm really bad at that. I apologize. Um, and he was on. I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the card. A Crystal Warriors of Light deck, which is something I haven't seen in a long time. But he was playing this Bart's. The Lena forward Soul is a Crystal user that happens to be Warrior of Light, pairs really well with Bart's and Lena. And was playing Crystal backups and all kinds of wild stuff. But that deck was really cool. But he was trying to save the 4-color Warrior of Light for his Chaos Combo deck, which was a Gilgamesh BE Chaos Combo deck. So it was a Fire, Wind, Water, Crystal Warriors of Light deck. And I made one mistake. So the one downside of my build of Refia is that my build is not explosive. It's not meant to be, because it doesn't have to be. The mistake I think a lot of people make with Refia sometimes is thinking that they need to make it stronger. But like the late game of Refia is so strong and so good that being more explosive oftentimes doesn't increase your win rate over consistency cards and EX bursts and things like that, right? Making it even harder for your opponent to rush you down because the late game of Refia is so strong anyway, right? But it does mean that on occasion you can get other players can be more explosive than you and they can win based on that situation. So we both race out to a bunch of backups. I had my 4 colors of backups. I play a Warrior of Light. I attack. I go to my second main. And I tap my 4 backups and pitch a card in hand to play a Seraph FL, thinking that I'm setting myself up. Even though I have Amaterasu in hand, I shouldn't need it this next turn because I'm in a control mirror. All I need to do is get to that next turn, and I am good. My opponent goes Bart's, then plays Lena, gains a crystal, spends the crystals, revives Soul. Soul spends the crystal that it gains off of Bart's making from him entering, then proceeds to play Refia from hand, and then revive like Ferris, and then plays the 2-cost Warrior of Light LB. And I'm now in a situation where I don't have the right colors to Shantoto LB, and I don't have Shantoto in hand, so I can't wipe the board that way. And this Bart's is really difficult, especially combined with Refia for removal, and Warrior of Light saying I can't target anything. And I end up in a really, really bad spot because I dared to tap out and not keep the Amaterasu alive. I mean, it was a mistake. Like I very clearly greeted 1 turn too many on backups, and it cost me the game. But that's fine. It was a really cool deck. My opponent was awesome. But now I am 1-2, and I'm feeling like a little scary at that point. 4th round, play against, I believe, another Japanese player, this time on a mono ice deck. It might have been and just kind of drew the nuts. Like, I kept drawing Refia and access to Refia, and something that I'm pretty in tune about is recognizing when opponents get frustrated seeing specific things. And every time Refia hit the playing field, my opponent would just get, like, visibly frustrated. Which, like, I get it, but also, if I see that, I started to smell blood in the water. Like, I'm just like, okay, cool, we're going to get Refia on field any chance we get, regardless. And see if I can make my opponent make some bad decisions, which they ended up doing. They ended up not committing to like the 7-cost Kurosame as early as they could have, and it really cost them. And I just kind of out-resourced this mono ice deck just because I had a higher ceiling than they did. So I go into the lunch break at 2-2. I need to win out to have a chance at top cut. So I sit down for my round 5, roll my dice, take my first 5 cards, I look at them, and they're bad. I mulligan them away. I draw my new 5. It's got like a Nordstalin. I'm like, okay, cool. This is a decent enough start. So I go Nordstalin, search Shieldskin, and pass. My opponent, looks at me and kind of laughs, Draws his 2, goes Nordstalin, search for Stiltskin, discard Stiltskin, or play Nash, plays Zidane. I have never been so eaten alive by a Zidane in my entire life. This Zidane stole, in sequence, first hit, Chocobo. One of the worst things you can have as Zidane steal is a protection spell. A Kus Sith, an Azura, a Chocobo, anything that makes it not worth targeting Zidane, because then they also put themselves in a position where if you go to remove the Zidane, you're helping them because instead of getting 1 card next turn, they're taking 2. He attacks, takes a Venat. So now discarding the backup, the Stiltskin, is no longer a problem. He stole the best backup he could have for the mirror match. So I'm now with 1 backup. I've got 4 cards in hand. I've got a Zidane staring me in the face. I draw my 2. I don't have a way of getting the Zidane off the field without overcommitting like crazy. And so I'm like, I'll give him one more. Like, I don't have a choice. If I remove him, or go to remove him, he can Chocobo it, and I end up in the exact same situation, except worse next turn. I need to just set up. So I play a fat Chocobo that I have in hand, and get the Chocolate out of the deck. My opponent, draws their next 2. They attack again. They steal a second Chocobo summon. At this point, I'm just committed to leaving the Zidane on the field because there's just nothing I can do about it. The Zidane proceeds to next turn steal Lulu, then hit a Lulu into damage. So now I'm down 2 Chocobos in the deck and 2 Lulus. What was the last thing he stole? Oh, he stole the Tomos after that. It's a mono-win mirror match. And by the end of it, I had 1 card removed from the game by Zidane because everything that he stole was so comically playable off of me. Meanwhile, I am trying to do the same thing back to him. I'm trying to use my own Zidane to do anything I can to get back into the game. And I steal 2 dead backups when I already have 5. I steal a Fina, which is one of the worst steals in the mirror because while I can't get Fina anymore, it's not a castable card. It's not a card that casting does anything other than put an untargetable Bungus on the field. And then I steal a Lulu, which was nice because I lost 2 Lulus to my opponent's stuff before that. But, there's just nothing I could have done there. Which, sucks. It means that, of my, losses so far, I think that, I could have won the Crystal Refia game if I didn't overcommit for the Sarah. But my game 1 I lost because my Chaos opponent flared 3 times and drew a Chaos in the right time to win the game. And I lost because I had a Zidane come down on turn 1 again, or my opponent's first turn and just eat me alive. There's just no counterplay to either of those situations for me that would have been satisfactory or gave me a chance to win those games, other than bursting better in game 1 and not having my opponent draw Zidane in game 5. So I'm eliminated from the tourney at this point. I've got 3 losses. But, obviously I'm at Worlds. I'm going to play it out. And I really wanted the binder for top 16 anyway. And going X3 still gave me a chance at that. So my next round I sit down. My opponent was playing a Water, Fire, EX Burst deck. And he sees the win cards and he just holds his head and just goes, oh no. Because mono win can't lose to a deck like that for the most part. There is not enough efficient removal, and when you factor in Zidane and everything else, he just was never going to be able to push the damage through and win the game. I think I won on deck out even. So I'm now 3-3. I've lost then won every single thing. And unfortunately that pattern continues. In round 7 I play against, I remember the name is Super Event, Japanese player, and he's playing Earth, Lightning, Chaos Arc. And I don't know, this was a match that I wish I could kind of replay, because I clearly did not play this as well as I could. So I play tested a lot against my friend who was on Mono Earth. And I tried to play the matchup relatively similarly, thinking that it would be kind of like that, but there's some pretty key differences on Earth Lightning. First of all, he was on 2 copies of the 1CP Ramu, which combined with Man in Black to make sure that Tomos and such couldn't stay. I also got Hecaton Sheared at one point, which could be a really big problem because Mono Win needs to run fewer backups to make sure that it always draws into action. And then I had a really weird problem where I drew all 3 of my Finas, and I probably held on to them, and I shouldn't have. Just a really awkward situation. I know all 3 Finas went to cancel a Man in Black getting back a summon. hilariously enough. But I don't think I got the value that I had from the lack of tempo from playing those cards in the way that I did. But I just kind of got burned out and didn't have the resources to win that game. I don't think I played that very well, but like I'm also a little bit out of it at this point. I've been officially, eliminated from contention for top cut, and just not my day. Final round, I sit down, and I mulligan no backups into no backups. My opponent goes, Fran, play Larsa, Larsa search Bosch, play Bosch. Now I'm in a situation where I have Izana in play with 5 cards in hand, but I have to overcommit into a Lulu to get the Bosch off the field, and the Fran's still going to just keep doing Fran things. And I lose the game in like 4 turns. We play that one back afterwards. I end up winning the run back at the last bit. Really cool deck. I love seeing Sky Pirates get some small resurgence with Fran, or with Fran and Bosch. But so all in all, I went 3-5. I think that like the Sky Pirates match where I didn't draw backups, the Mono Wind Mirror, and the Chaos match were just completely out of my control. That's 3 losses right there. Granted, if I won those games, I'd have different opponents. You know, it's like, if thing had happened, other thing would have happened. I do get it. Got a little bit of vengeance on day 2. I just ran back the Refia list for the side event and went undefeated in 5 rounds of Swiss. Classic ghoul luck. Do well on the day of the tourney that doesn't actually matter. But it was a nice confidence booster at least to have a good second day. Some really fun games there too. I had a game against a mono water opponent that went to time and deck out, and I ended up winning on deck out at the very last bit. Just a really fun day all around. The event was fantastic. I had a great time. Like I said, I wish I did better, but like again, there's only so much that you can control sometimes, and like that's just the game and the format currently. Congrats to the players that did really well. In particular, I know that KP watches these and had a fantastic tourney run. A little sad that he couldn't take it home for an A, but yeah, it was a great tourney all the way around. Hopefully, I'll be back next year. But in the meantime, you guys can find me doing content. Like I said, I stream locals on Wednesdays all the time still. Should be a lot of fun. Drop by, say hi, and let me know if any of these deck lists that I talked about today were interesting to you. Like I said, I can play them at the online locals if you guys want, or I can talk about them more in future stuff. Travis and I had to talk about crystals. I think it'd be kind of an interesting talk to talk about crystals and kind of their impact on the game and how it's in kind of a weird spot overall. Yeah, thanks for watching this way too long recap video, and I'll see you in the next one.